of control and almost ruined my life. I realized I needed help to fix my problem before it totally destroyed me. If you've tried to fix your drinking and drug problem and you know you can't do it alone, you need to call the National Treatment Advisors. They'll immerse you into a 30-day program to replace your old habits with new habits and totally change your life. And if you have PPO private health insurance, the entire program may be covered. Fix your problem right now before it gets any worse. Get clean. Call now and learn more. 877-247-1581. 877-247-1581. 877-247-1581.
I would like to personally invite you out to the Blue Family Fund Casino Night. An evening of all your favorite casino games, next-level auction items, great music, and an open bar. February 26th, 7 p.m. at the beautiful TX Whiskey Ranch in Fort Worth, Texas. All proceeds from the evening will benefit families of first responders. You need to get your tickets today at bluefamilyfund.org.
The voice of Johnson County, Joco Community Radio. Welcome to the Her Show, Home Experience Radio, with your host, Trina Titus Lozano. This is a live call-in show that takes your calls and questions about marriage, family, and personal relationships. She's a licensed and ordained pastoral counselor, author, international conference speaker, wife, mom, and grandmother. She's been counseling and teaching vital relationship skills for over 30 years. Trina is real and relational and reveals strong truths spoken in tough love and common sense. Join us on the studio line now at 817-637-2585. And now, here's Trina.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Her Show, Home Experience Radio, making your home a place of love and peace. And I'm here today in the studio with John Seidl, best-selling author of a new book called Finding Rest, A Survivor's Guide to Navigating the Valleys of Anxiety, Faith, and Life. Welcome to the studio, John.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
You are so welcome. It is just such a privilege to have you here. Y'all, this man, he has been telling stories, and in fact, he has written over 6,000 of them, first after helping to start the top 50 news site, then as the editor-in-chief of a popular nonprofit, I Am Second, which is a really big deal in the Dallas area here. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with I Am Second, but it is such a great organization and ministry. And most recently, John has been the head of a special digital media product for actor Kirk Cameron. And Kirk actually wrote the foreword of his book. And so John now runs his own digital media consulting and content creation firm called the Veritas Creative, I guess is the way you pronounce that, Veritas Creative. So John has seen how the power of storytelling can transform people, businesses, and culture, especially after sharing his own story of battling anxiety and OCD. His passion is to help people with mental health struggles while also sharing what he's learned, telling stories for and working with some of media's biggest names and organizations, including Glenn Beck. I know Glenn Beck, love him. Kirk Cameron, love that guy. And we certainly love Chip and Joanna Gaines too. So you certainly have surrounded yourself with greatness with these people. But his book on anxiety, Finding Rest, was released in September last year, just in the fall, and it instantly became a #1 Amazon bestseller, topping the charts in several categories like anxieties and phobias, mood disorders, obsessive compulsive disorder. In fact, it shot up to become the #17 new release on all of Amazon and became the top 100 bestseller on all of Amazon as well. And I listened to his book. I did the whole audiobook thing, and I really, really loved it. Couldn't wait to get him on the show because, as you know, I'm a counselor and I work with people that struggle with this problem. And it has just become so apparent how desperate people are to talk about it. And the best way to talk about it, is to share your story. And I think the story that is so tragic that's come out in the news the past few days is of Chesley Christ,
Mhm.
who was the 2019 Miss USA, only 30 years old, died after jumping from a building in Manhattan. And here she is, an attorney, a fashion blogger, and news correspondent.
I think she had 2 or 3 degrees.
I
You
know.
know.
I mean, you would, and really at the peak of her success is what it seemed like.
Mhm.
But then in her last Instagram post, may this day bring you rest in peace. And of course, we want her to rest in peace, but we know that peace is what was missing in her life. She did not have rest and peace. And that
Mhm.
is what led her to such a devastating, tragic loss at the end of her life. And while I mention this, I just want to say, if you have friends or family that you think might be struggling with anxiety and depression, please write down this number, the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, 1-800-273-TALK, 1-800-273-TALK, 8255 TALK, 1-800-273-8255. And really talk, get some help. Even if they don't make the call, you make the call. You make the call, get the help, see if there's anything you can do. It's worth a try. Don't be embarrassed. Just do your best. And I think it's always best is if we see somebody that is struggling, that we just are willing to make the call, reach out, tell them, I'm here. I'm here for you. And you know what? Tell me your story. Tell me what's
Mhm.
going on. And maybe they'll tell you, maybe they won't. But just to know that you love them and that you're there to give them a hug and to
Yeah.
just to be there. And one of my favorite chapters in your book was really about how the friends and family and loved
Mm.
ones of people that are struggling with anxiety and even depression or OCD, because oftentimes people of loved ones, we don't know what to do to help with the person that we see that is just literally just being tormented by this mental illness. It really is. It's a mental
Mhm.
illness. And so it's heart-shattering to watch someone struggle with just the torment of anxiety. So you're here today to tell us your story. You're shaking your head yes.
Yes.
So I'm excited to just release you to begin telling your story.
Yeah, well, let me before I even dive fully into that, I mean, let me just kind of because I posted about that incident this morning. You know, I lived in New York for 7 years. I know exactly where that
Oh,
happened.
right there in Manhattan.
Yeah, right near Midtown of all places. But you know, I went through depression myself, something that I never really saw coming, even though I had anxiety and OCD. And I didn't quite have the trifecta until I did, right?
Mhm.
And you know, I remember one night in particular where I was, you know, I was at my lowest point and had started thinking about how I was going to do it, you know, what it would be like. And I reached out to an old group of friends from my church. Actually, we were still on a text chain, and I just said, you know, hey guys, you know, just pray for me going through a really hard time. And immediately my phone rang, and it was a buddy of mine. He's actually a really popular sports writer, and you know, I only say that because he's one of those people that you would think is really busy all the time, right? A
Mhm.
national sports writer, and
Yeah.
he immediately picked up the phone and called me, and it was a phone call that I feel like saved my life, you know.
Mm.
And so you just to your point, you just never know when you get a text, even just like pray for me, I'm having a really hard time. Just your immediate response can save someone's life, you know,
Absolutely.
because you don't know what they're battling with. And I'm sure a lot of people didn't know what she was battling with.
There
Even that post in the morning, you
you have
know.
no way of knowing,
Yeah.
but you're right. An immediate phone call is so much more than a text.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it's for him to just be like, you mean a lot to me, and I'm
Hmm.
dropping everything right now. What the heck is going on,
Yeah.
and how can I help? I mean, I will pray for you." And then I often say, "Okay, we're praying right now."
Yeah.
You know, and when someone says, "Hey, can you pray for me?" I'm like, "Okay, I'm praying right now.
Yep.
Like, call me, Lord, I'm praying."
Yep.
Yeah. So that is really that. There you go. There's
Yeah.
tip number one.
Yeah, there's tip number one, right? I
That's
mean,
right.
just being available, right? They
That's
say in
right.
sports the best ability is availability.
That's
And
right.
so I think if we took that kind of approach with our friends as well,
Absolutely.
I think that would go a long way. So my story is you know, growing up, I knew there was something different about me. And it's kind of one of those things that you just kind of think, okay, this is just how life is, right? This is just how I'm wired. And yes, that is true, right? But I'm also miswired a little bit too. And so it was just there was just things I could not get out of my head, and things that I would just truly obsess over that I just could not stop thinking about. And I explain it like a constant feeling of standing on the edge. If you've ever been to the Grand Canyon or some other type of like awe-inspiring ledge, maybe it's the Hoover Dam or whatnot, but where you go and you kind of look down and you get that like pit in your stomach, you know? And that was just a lot of my reality growing up.
Wow.
And I had a tough home life, you know. I mean, who doesn't these days? I feel like you're the exception if you have a good just coast is clear home life. But my parents divorced when I was 3-ish, and my mom got remarried, but it wasn't easy, right? My stepdad was thrust into the father of 4 kids, you know, right away. And so I think he had a lot of learning to do. We had a lot of learning to do. And my sister turned to drugs at a real early age, pregnant by 16. And so just home life was just very chaotic and hectic. And so I kind of joke that I have no idea how I got through high school and college. And especially in high school, you know, I grew up in a faith-based home and you know, kind of told like, hey, live your life in a way that people are going to see how you're living and they're going to want what you have. Right?
That's the cliche for sure.
Right. And in my head, it was always like, why would anyone want what I have? Right. Cause I don't really have rest. I don't really have peace. And, kind of going through then college, you know, I go to college in New York City, which is, you know, one of, if not the most frenetic places that you can go to, right? Just constantly going and constantly moving.
The city that never sleeps.
Exactly. Right. So, I really don't, you know, I mean, I know by the grace of God, right, how I got through that, but that was really kind of tough. And so I got married, and as I think marriage relationships do, and you would know this really well too, just in a lot of your counseling, but it has a way of bringing things out that you maybe thought was normal or wasn't a big deal or whatnot.
That's right. All of a sudden you have someone else to give you perspective.
Yes. And feedback.
And to give you an opportunity for growth.
Yes. So that was, you know, so we got married, lived in Colorado for a year. She was finishing off school and moved back to New York. And we say like that was our second year of marriage where we moved to New York. And we say that was our tough year. And it was really the beginning of some really tough years. And so we were married for, I want to say about 3-4 years. And we moved to Texas here. And there was just one, you know, my wife is a saint, obviously, but there was one incident that really kind of thrust everything into the spotlight. And so it was just
the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah. And it involves Sweet and Low.
The last straw.
The last straw. And that was, we were living in downtown Dallas, and we were about to go on a walk downtown. And I said, hey, there was like this cool swanky coffee shop below. And I said, hey, why don't you run and get the coffee? I'm going to run there was a bathroom downstairs kind of in the back. And I was like, I'm going to run to the bathroom. Remember, no Splenda. And she's like, yeah, I got it. I just hate Splenda. I think it tastes like dirty sock water. I can't stand it. And she goes, okay, yeah, I got it. So I come back from the bathroom. She hands me my coffee. I take a sip and I just want to like spit it out, because it's got Splenda in it. And I'm like, you had one job. You did not understand the assignment, you know? And for the rest of not only the day, but really the weekend, it ruined our relationship.
Couldn't even have a good time.
No. And that, you know, I think so some
people, it really wasn't her fault. It was, I guess they just either, I don't know if she ordered it wrong or if they
wasn't paying attention, or maybe they just put the wrong thing in.
Maybe they just put the wrong thing in. And so, okay, just for the sake of getting the story straight.
Yeah.
What did you want? Was it black coffee or did you want what did you want? Did you want black coffee or did you want
I wanted sweet and low in it.
You wanted sweet and
Yeah.
low, not Splenda.
Not Splenda. I just cannot stand Splenda. Or I would prefer it either black or if no sweet and low, black.
Okay, so black or sweet and low, but definitely not Splenda.
Not Splenda.
But it was Splenda.
And
you knew it immediately. You were
Immediately.
disgusted. And so anyway, it started a big tension, a fight, a frustration. And I'm sure, did you get the coffee fixed? Like, did you go, or did you just say you were too mad?
I think I
You're just
think,
like, forget it, just throw it away, forget it. I don't even want anything now.
And I think, there's going to be some people that hear that and they're like, oh, that's silly. And I would say, you're right. That is silly. Right. But for someone with OCD, those little things make they just throw you for a loop,
Yeah. And you were feeling like nobody cares. She's not listening.
Right.
How
you start reading into everything.
Yeah.
And, I joke that us people with OCD, and I'll explain, like, if you have OCD, you have anxiety. Not all people who have anxiety have OCD, but I can get into that later. But I joke that we're the only people who can get a paper cut, and within 4 hours we have cancer. You know what I mean?
Right. Things just go on and on.
Right. Your mind just starts, what if? And I call it the tyranny of the what if. So we go out of the coffee shop, and over the next 24 hours, she's just broken, in front of me, and just kind of, crying and saying, like, basically, like, John, we can't live like this.
Yeah.
Like, this is, like you said, the straw that broke the camel's back. But the idea being, John, this is just a microcosm of a lot of the stuff we deal with, like, where I don't know what's going to set you off. And when she says set you off, it's not like, I wouldn't get into, fits of rage and be punching things.
No, but you couldn't quit thinking about it.
I could not quit thinking about it. And
couldn't just let it go.
Right. Yeah. I could not Elsa it. Elsa.
Yeah.
And so she, I think when you see someone, obviously, that you love so much in front of you, just broken, it kind of, I'm not going to say snaps you out of it, right? Because you're still struggling with the thoughts, but at least can bring you to an opportunity to do some self-evaluation.
Yeah.
And so in that weekend, I said, okay, you're right. Like, I don't want you, I don't want this to be your reality. I think in that moment, I saw exactly what, and I didn't know it at the time, my disease was doing to her.
Yes.
But I was at least willing to explore what this was.
Yeah.
And so that day I made an appointment with the first psychiatrist who was available. And I went to him, I think within about 2 weeks, and walked in, kind of told him everything that was going on. And it was a pretty easy diagnosis for him.
Yeah.
Because, you have generalized anxiety disorder, GAD.
Yeah, just from that one story.
Yeah, right.
If I know, even in my counseling office, I would be like, okay.
Yeah,
that's
right.
like, that's really all you need to know.
And so he goes, you have GAD, generalized anxiety disorder, with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. And it was the most freeing day of my life, because I finally knew what I was fighting against.
Yeah.
And so, I explain it this way. It's like, before, I had a blindfold on, the lights were off. I didn't, I had a sword, but I wasn't sure where I was swinging it, or who, even if there was anyone else in the room. Right.
Yeah.
That day, the blindfold came off, the lights came on, and I finally knew and understood who and what I was fighting.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so even in the book, there's one of the early chapters is called "Call It by Its Name." And it's the idea that when we know what we're fighting against, we can then fully fight it.
Well, it's truth.
Yeah.
It's truth.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that truth really brings freedom. It's a platform to build on.
Yes, absolutely. And so that was an historic day for me. And I don't, it's not like the book isn't just like that. Let me put it this way. That's where the book really starts, right?
Yeah.
That wasn't an ending point for me. I think that was really the beginning of me trying to figure out, okay, what does it look like to live with this? What does it look like, as a person of faith, to kind of,
Yes.
make those things make sense? Because I was kind of brought up in a tradition that said, well, if you just pray more, if you just have enough faith, if you just repent of something that you don't even know you need to repent of, then everything's going to be fine.
Yeah.
And the reality is that those things weren't true, you know?
Well, I love that in your book you talk about medication being a common grace.
Mhm.
What a beautiful description of the help that medication was to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so common grace, this idea is basically like it's the good things in life that everyone gets, right? So rain, right? And even
Yep.
if you're a person of faith, the Bible always talks about the rain on the just and the unjust.
Matthew
Yeah.
chapter 5. I know it
Exactly.
well.
So the idea is that it's these things that we all get to enjoy: the sun,
That's right.
good food, right? The ability to taste good food. And so for me, as I really started in college, even beforehand, before I was diagnosed, started really trying to understand these things, it then really became prevalent to me once I was diagnosed and on medication that, oh, this medication is one of those common graces, right?
Yes.
It's something that we are all able to enjoy.
That's right.
As a person of faith, I believe that obviously, all truth is God's truth, right? And so the discoveries that led to a medication like mine, I credit to to God, right? Allowing that to happen. And there's a story I tell in the book that I think really helps drive this home. Is like, it's kind of that classic fable of there's a man and it starts flooding, right? And so let's just put him in Houston, right? Just seems to flood there. And so the waters start rising and the police car comes by and he says, hey, get in the car, you got to go, we got to evacuate. And he says, no, I'm praying for God to save me. I have faith, don't worry about it. So the policeman drives off, the waters rise, and it's up to his chest, and a boat comes and they say, hey, hop in, let's go. And he goes, no, I'm praying for God to help me, right?
That's right.
And then the waters rise and he's on his roof and a helicopter comes and they say, hop in, like here's the rope. And he goes, no, I'm praying for God to help me, right? And sure enough, like he drowns and he gets to heaven and he says, God, like I really thought you were going to help me. Why didn't you help me? And he goes, well, I sent you a car, a boat, and a helicopter. What more do you need? Right.
Right.
And so for me, medication is the car, the boat, and the helicopter, or it's one of those, I should say.
Yeah, absolutely.
I go through a lot of pain to say, like, I don't take a magic pill and I don't know any magic pill. Right.
Right.
So for me, treating my anxiety and OCD is about treating it, in multiple facets.
Yes.
And so I call it, brain, body, and spiritually. And so I medication is one of the things that I do for my mental health, and we can get into some of the other ones. But yes, it's a common grace. Like the Lord for me has sent that to us. It's the boat, it's the
absolutely.
helicopter. And I think if more people treated it that way, we'd be in a much better position.
Yeah, it's very important because with something like what you were diagnosed with, you can switch with that other chair over there. When you were diagnosed with this, what happens is there's an understanding that your brain has a misfire. There's a disconnect, there's a misfire, and so there is a way to fix that so that you can function correctly.
Yeah.
And even without that, you really can't even in a very logical and cognitive way even get to the reality and the beauty of your walk with the Lord and your faith, because you're obsessing over the sweet and low.
Yeah.
So it's like even reading the scripture at that point it's not going to get through because there's this misfire that's going and it's like it's there. And so there's got to be a way so that even you can, in a logical and reasonable way, say, you know what, accidents happen, people make mistakes, it's okay. Forget it. I don't need coffee, or you know what, let's just go back and they'll fix it and we'll move on with our day. But without the medication, you don't even have the ability to process that the way that you should be able to normally.
Yeah. And one of the cool analogies that kind of came up as I've been talking about the book is it's kind of like this. I wear glasses. And so if you're watching online, you can see I wear glasses. And so if I want to read this book, if I want to read any book, if I don't have my glasses on, it doesn't matter how much I stare into it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how hard I try. It doesn't matter how much you tell me to just read it already.
Or how much faith you
Yeah,
have.
exactly. If I don't have my glasses on, I can't read it.
Yeah,
And so the medication is really my glasses. I put that on, and it then allows me to then read and study and really understand what's going on. If my anxiety and OCD is at an 8, medication brings it down to a 4, to that point, like you said, where I'm
Exactly.
able to now, as the things hit me, I'm able to either deflect them or say, okay, take a step back, use some of the tools that you've learned over these last years to be able to, ingest that like a quote unquote normal person would.
Exactly. And it doesn't take long until you realize this is working.
Mm-hmm.
Like you feel it working. You feel differently.
Yeah.
And you know it's working.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that was, I think in general it takes about, I think it's like 2 weeks, right? And so it kind of gets through your system, and it really is. People are like, so did you feel different? And I said, it's not that, it's not like I walk around like, floating or anything, but really what it does is when those stimuli, because really what anxiety is, it's an overactive fight or flight response.
That's right.
And so when that stimuli hits, I don't immediately go into fight or flight mode.
Yes.
Right. Oh,
you
I
can ride the
think through
wave.
that.
You can ride the wave.
Right. Exactly. So that's what it's done for me.
That's amazing. And not just in the faith-based community, like you had mentioned before, which there can be a real stigma, but even just in the world with people that want to be more homeopathic and be more natural. And, they want to provide you solutions that are, natural solutions, just change your diet, change the way you're eating. And it's like, that's not really going to bring the correction that you need for what you were dealing with. But there is judgment. There is judgment.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, right? Because I think there are, I've experienced a lot of that stigma, obviously in the faith community, but it is out there, right?
It is.
Beyond the faith community. And I think, listen, I wish I could just, again, there's no magic pill, but there's also no magic diet.
That's right.
And I've done all the things, right? I have worked on my eating. I have made decisions about, exercise and eating. And when I do all of those things and combine it with medication, that's where I start finding rest.
That's right. Finding rest, which was what the book is about. This is just one of the many topics that John covers. But, if you got anything out of this first session with him, you need to know that number 1, mental illness is a real thing. Number 2, medication is okay. Number 3, if you have a loved one that is in your life that is struggling, encourage them to get help, because we want to help them. We want to support them, and we want to do our part to love them well and to let them know that there is help. So I definitely recommend this book, and stick with me. We'll be right back after the break with John to talk more about finding rest.
Here's a great way to save money on your prescription medications. If you take Viagra or Cialis, we can give you a way to pay as little as $2 a pill. Compare that to prices as high as $60 per tablet. These pills work for men and women to improve their sexual performance. And now for the price of 2 or 3 pills, you can get nearly 100. There's no need to pay expensive prices for Viagra or Cialis. Call now with your prescription and pay as little as $2 a pill. We offer 24/7 service and always free delivery and confidential packaging. Change your life for the better and have fun. Call Pharmacy Shop 24/7 to get generic versions of Viagra or Cialis for as little as $2 a pill, plus free discreet shipping.
800-627-3988. 800-627-3988. 800-627-3988. That's 800-627-3988.
Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395.
Out of deck carpet giving you the blues? Tired of your old dingy and broken tile? Let my friends at the Floor Store in Cleveland, Texas give your home the makeover it deserves. This is Old Taco Joe coming to you for the Floor Store. Whether it's carpet, tile, wood flooring, or real wood laminate, the Floor Store can cover all of your flooring needs. Located at 405 West Henderson Street in Cleveland, Texas, owner Brent Harris can help. Shower tile, tub surrounds, even backsplashes. Give them a call today at 817-641-9444. The Floor Store, they got you covered.
You're listening to Joco Community Radio.
Welcome back to the Her Show. I'm Trina Titus Lozano, pastoral counselor, licensed and ordained Christian minister, and I'm here today to give you a resource about dealing with anxiety and OCD and maybe even depression. But Finding Rest by Jonathon Seidl, you want to go to his website and learn more about him. Get this book. You can order on Amazon or get it from Walmart or Target, but johnseidl.com, JONSEIDL.com, JONSEIDL.com. This book, I believe, is currently the best resource. And it's a survivor's guide to navigating the valleys of anxiety, faith, and life. And if you struggle with anxiety, you know that your life is desperate for rest. Your life is desperate to find rest. And so this is an incredible survivor's guide. And it's just a beautiful thing to be able to have rest after the torment of really a lifelong, many, many, many years, decades that you had of really being tormented by your OCD.
Yeah. And so I think a good place to start as we come back with this segment is kind of explaining. I kind of talked about OCD and anxiety, right? And so it's kind of like one of those word problems that you see in school and those Venn diagrams, right? Or those little circles is like everyone who has OCD has anxiety. Not everyone who has anxiety has OCD. And really so anxiety is kind of that overactive fight or flight response. And the OCD is really these obsessive thoughts that then usually couple with compulsions. And so I think a lot of people think of like a Howie Mandel, right? Where he has to wash his hands all the time, or the person that has to lock their doors. And that is one example of what OCD looks like. But there's this other set that's really intrusive thought OCD. Mm-hmm. And it's those thoughts that you can't get out of your head. And sometimes there are compulsions that go with it, but they're not quite like I have to wash my hands, 1,000 times. And so for me, that's mine was that intrusive thought OCD, things that I just could not get out of my head. Now that would drive me to try to get them out of my head in certain ways. So for example, before I was diagnosed and treated, I would send an email to a boss or to someone, and I would go back and be convinced that there was maybe a typo or a tone that I didn't want to communicate that was there. And so I would reread that email upwards of 50 times after it was already sent. So by the way, I can't really do anything about it,
Yeah.
And those, so that's one example. The other example, and I thought this one, when I wrote about this for the first time, I thought, oh man, people are really going to think I'm silly. And you have no idea how many people wrote in and told me that they had this too. And it was driving down the street and I don't know, went over something, just like a little bump or something. And by the time I got to the stoplight, I had convinced myself that I had run someone over, and I circled a block 3 times just looking for like,
what did I hit?
Yeah. Blood, people taking pictures. And again, it was nothing. Right.
Yeah.
But those are the kind of intrusive thoughts that, that's the first time I had that one. I don't know where that came from, but what I've then come to understand is, your OCD can manifest in different ways. And so for me, one of the things is car trouble.
Mm.
Like if I hear a sound in my car, I obsess about it, right? And you know, we were walking into the studio today. I was telling you that, you know, and my grandpa was an old mechanic, right?
Uh-huh,
And so
uh-huh.
maybe there's something there at some point, you know.
Yeah.
But so there's just little things that it kind of manifests itself in. And so for some people that might sound familiar, some people that might sound weird. But you know, that's kind of where
Yeah.
what mine has looked like.
Yeah. Where it's not just a little concerned or a thought of maybe this happens. Oh, I need to double check this.
Yes.
It's not just double checking. It's like you say, 50 times.
Yes, exactly. And so that's where, you know, it can look like that for the person who's checking the doors, right?
Yeah.
They're going to check it 50 times.
Right.
But yeah, that's kind of, you know, there was just always thoughts that I could not get out of my head. And so that's, you know, that can be a really, what's interesting, and I write in the book is that, you know, one of the chapters you had mentioned it that has been kind of a breakout success is chapter 9, and that is the book for, or that is the chapter for people who love people like me.
Yes.
Right.
And the title is Help Me Understand.
Yes,
I think that's just so beautiful.
Exactly. And so, you know, that chapter has really been just, I know it's been a blessing to a lot of people. It's been a blessing to me to kind of hear what other people have said. And so in that chapter, I talk about just, you know, how what this looks like, you know, how you as a loved one can respond to someone like me, and kind of what really goes on and what we're thinking and what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And, you know, so for me, like the thoughts that I couldn't get out of my head, you know, it's not helpful for people to just say, well, just get over it already. You know?
Right. We need to remove that word already from our vocabulary.
Yeah.
And but that's right. Just get over it already, or you know, enough already.
Just pray about it already, you know.
Yeah, right, right.
Things.
And I was sharing with you earlier, I have a grandson that struggles with this disorder. And so I was very interested in this chapter to kind of know, and your book actually has a lot of do's and don'ts. It's very practical. It's very helpful. And then you know, but yeah, you have to remove that word completely.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And you know,
that's a big no-no.
Yeah. I was trying to visually explain it, but it's kind of like if I imagine what it looks like when an atom bomb, you know, drops and the kind of nuclear explosion.
Yeah. Catastrophic.
Yeah. That's kind of what happens inside. You know, listen, if I could just stop thinking about the running over of the person that I didn't run over, I would have already.
Right.
You know, I don't want this.
Right. Right.
And so I think it's like, if I could just stop thinking about it already, I would love that.
Yes.
But I can't.
And I think like my grandson, he's very verbal. And so if he's just thinking about it, it's one thing if he's by himself, but then if he's with me, he'll ask me the same question, or he'll tell me the same concern that he has over and 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 over again. Constant. I mean, it really, like, this is such a great chapter to just say, okay, help me understand, because whenever a person gets in that loop and it's just over and over again, what is the very best thing we can say to get them out of it?
Yeah. So I actually think it's not as much of what you say, but it's asking some of the right questions. You know, when I went into so I also do counseling, right? And so I did really, really intensive counseling when I was first diagnosed, and I still do what I call, you know, I go in for tune-ups. Right?
Yeah. I do a lot of tune-ups with people.
Exactly.
I'm a real advocate for counseling.
Yes.
And of course, my listeners know that. I encourage people to go to counseling, to get a counselor. And if you don't have someone and you need a referral, please give me a call. And as you know, I'm happy to help as well.
Yeah.
But I can get you a referral in your area, so it's convenient. But people need counseling. It's such a beautiful ministry and such a great help for mental health.
Yeah. And so when I went in, you know, I referred earlier to the tyranny of what if. And so the tyranny of the what if is where my anxiety and OCD constantly takes me, right? It's why I said, you know, we're the only people who can get a paper cut and in 4 hours have cancer.
Right.
And it's because, you know, we keep going, what if? Well, what if I did make a typo? what's going to happen? What's my boss going to think? Blah, blah, blah. And so I think some of the ways that if you love someone like me is really starting to ask those questions. Oh, so now what is it exactly that you're worried about? What is the worst case scenario that you're imagining? Right.
Yes.
And kind of start working backwards. Okay. So what
if you did have cancer?
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess I would go to the doctor and we would treat it and you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
start, some of what I lack is kind of that spur of the moment logical thinking.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Well, John, you ran something over. If you hit a person, would it not have damaged your truck? Right. I mean, I've ran into a raccoon before and it does a lot of damage. Right.
Yeah, sure.
So okay, so you're looking at your truck and you know that there's literally not a crack in your bumper.
It didn't happen.
Right.
Yeah.
So okay, so there's not a crack in your bumper,
It didn't happen. Yeah.
Exactly. So you just I would say and so start asking questions, and obviously not in a cocky or like crazy way.
Just in a way to help you process. And
Right.
another thing that you suggest, which I think is really, really incredible, and is to help move them out of that place by serving somehow or
Yeah.
doing something for somebody else. And I think as a loved one, I can say to my grandson, for instance, hey, why don't we go cook dinner together? Or hey,
Mhm.
help me set the table. Or hey, would you help me so we can help your brother do his homework? We can do it together.
Yeah.
Any little act of service to help get the distraction off of what I'm thinking about by serving and helping someone else.
Yeah. So what I talk about in the book is how anxiety, depression, OCD, it's inherently self-focused,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
You're thinking about what's going to happen to you, what you're going through,
Yeah.
the worst case scenario for you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so this isn't just, this is obviously informed by my faith, but secular studies have shown this, that if you serve, it helps your mental health.
Yeah.
Because if anxiety and OCD and depression are self-focused, when you force yourself to serve, you're forcing yourself to be considering what others are going through and helping them, and you can't help not think about yourself then.
Yes.
Like you can't help but get out of those feelings and thoughts of, well, it's all about me, to, oh, what are they going through?
Yeah. And if you're worried about cancer, like we had said, even if you're helping someone who's dealing with that thing that you're actually really afraid of, or if you're afraid that you just hit somebody with a car. I have a client who did accidentally hit somebody with a car and how that impacted his life. But you know what? He's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And their family's okay.
Yeah.
And even though it was the most tragic accident, it turned out okay. And it's anybody's worst nightmare to do something like that, to accidentally hit a pedestrian. But you know what? It does happen. And so, I think if we can face our worst fear and then say, okay, not only what if, but what if? Well, then what now? And be able to face that and just to be able to talk through it. But like you said, so many of these things would be great if you could do it, but in that moment, it's just not a quick fix. There's got to be a process to this healing. And so as you did, the Lord just led you to, I love, face what your wife was telling you, accept it as an opportunity for growth instead of just getting stuck with it. Oh my gosh, she's rejecting me. She's criticizing me. I can't deal with it.
Yeah. And I would say, since I've been diagnosed, it has actually made me able to accept criticism better.
Yes.
To accept, I think I was always very quick because I couldn't get thoughts out of my mind. I think we all go, if your spouse brings something to you and says, hey, I'm really I just want to talk about this has kind of been bothering me.
Yeah.
Right. Even the normal person in those moments is going to be like, oh, have I let you down?
And maybe just get defensive.
Sure.
Or or feel rejected.
Exactly. So then you add on top of that, then thoughts that you can't get out of your head.
Right.
So where those may be even more than fleeting thoughts for the normal person. They were weekend killers for us, right?
Yes.
And so one of the things too that I talk about is I talk about the tyranny of the what if, and I say we have to turn it into so what's, right?
So what?
It's like, so as you were talking about, it's like, okay, well, what if my wife is really disappointed in me? And then, okay, well, so what if she's really disappointed in you? Do you think you're gonna, we've been married 13 years. You don't think you've disappointed her in 13 years? Of course you have.
Sure.
Like,
yeah.
oh, yeah, I guess I'm not perfect and I am going to make mistakes. And there are going to be times I would hope that she would, as we grow and
Yeah.
learn and become different people. I've always, by the way, just a little PSA, I've always thought it was funny when people get divorced and say, well, we just became different people. And I'm like, well, I'm a different person than I was 13 years ago.
We always will be. That's the one thing that is inevitable, is that change will happen.
Yeah.
We change, and people don't say the same. We won't say the same. And that is the only thing that we can know for certain. The only certain thing is uncertainty.
Yeah. So I want to grow, right? And so
Exactly.
now I'm in a position where I hear those concerns, or I hear that, criticism in scare quotes, and I'm able to actually digest it and learn from it and become better.
And it's an opportunity for growth. And this is what mental health is. In fact, this is emotional intelligence. The very first step of EQ, of emotional intelligence, is that you have the ability to accept feedback as an opportunity for growth. And you can say, thank you. I'll keep that in mind, and I'm going to work on that. And, it takes a really emotionally healthy person to be able to do that. A best case scenario.
Right.
But there is no chance that we can ever have a close relationship with anybody, and even can manage good relationships if we do not have the ability to grow.
Yeah.
And to accept the feedback. And Proverbs says so many times that it is wisdom to accept criticism. But boy, it's painful at first. But when you learn it, the more you do it, the better you get at it, where it doesn't have to be painful. You can truly just be grateful for it. It's a beautiful thing. Beautiful thing. Okay. Tell us about the most important book of the Bible.
Yeah. So, for me, the most important book of the Bible, and a little drum roll, I guess, is the book of Job. And
whoa, 1 out of 66, and you picked Job.
Oh, that's right.
Okay.
Yes.
I gotta say, this book has the best ending. It is the best end of the story of any other story in the Bible. It's, except for the resurrection.
Yeah.
Or maybe the second coming. But but the book of Job's, the end of the story is amazing. So anyway.
Which is interesting too, because I talk about that, and I think I came to appreciate the ending of the book of Job, in a very new way. And so with Job, it's like he loses everything, right? The devil and the Lord are talking, and the devil's like, well, if I take away all of his stuff, he's going to curse you. And God's like, okay, great, try it. And so he takes everything, and long story short,
his whole family, all of his possessions. Exactly. We don't want to assume that anybody knows the story, but Job, it's spelled Job, like job.
Yeah.
So go to that book, look it up, get your Bible app if you don't already have one. Read this story. It is a fascinating story.
And I think why it was so important for me is because I was raised in this tradition and idea that in a sense kind of says we can kind of curry favor with God, right? That like if we do all the right things, if we're always praying, if we always have enough faith, and we're always repenting and all that kind of thing, everything's going to go how we want it to go. And what's fascinating about the book of Job is he's called in the beginning of the book like the most righteous and upstanding man on the earth, right? And so what happens to the most righteous and upstanding man on the earth? He loses everything. He's on his deathbed.
Everything. Yeah. His health, his family's possessions, his health,
his kids,
his friends, his reputation,
everything.
And
so that got me thinking like, well, okay, if that can happen to Job, I'm not the most righteous and upstanding man in the world. Like bad things are going to happen, right?
Anything can happen to anyone at any time.
Right. And so I start realizing like, actually, well, if you look at the words of Jesus, what he said was, in this world, you will have trouble, right? It's like he never promised us that everything that we, like everything was just going to be roses and butterflies. Right.
Right.
And so, as I started looking at the book of Job, and I start realizing, hey, we are going to go through troubles in our life. We're going to go through hard times.
Absolutely.
Right? We were just talking about a family member that has cancer. And so I think that's not an indication that you are this really bad person. And actually, a newsflash, I would say, as a person of faith, is we're all bad people, which is why we need Jesus.
Exactly. Oh, yeah, totally.
And so,
totally.
It's really got me thinking of like, I am going to go through struggles. This is one of my struggles.
Yeah.
And it's not if I'm going to go through struggles, it's how I respond to those struggles. And it's how I view God in light of those struggles.
Yeah.
And how I've come to view God. And I call this in a very, a little convoluted, but a proper theology of suffering. And the idea is that we are all going to go through hard times, no matter if you're a Christian or not. As a Christian, though, I have hope of what those struggles are going to be used for.
That's right.
They're not for nothing. And
That's
that
right.
God uses them to refine me and to redefine me.
That's right.
And
I can get better, not bitter.
Yeah, exactly. And what he says is, I'm going to use these for your good and my glory, right? And anyone of a parent knows and understands that what I know to be good for my child is I would say, especially right now, since my kids are 6 and 3, 99% of the time they don't think that's good for them. Right.
Yeah, right.
My daughter just like, it's like if she closes the door behind her from coming in from outside, it's like, can I get a treat for that?
I know, right?
Everything deserves a treat. It's like, no, honey, I'm not going to give you a treat all the time, right? Like if you only eat treats, then you're not going to eat your dinner, and then you're going to
right.
all that kind of stuff. And so I've kind of come to the understanding of that, like this struggle is actually being used for my good.
Absolutely.
And so there's another guy in the Bible called Paul, and he talks about having this thorn in his flesh.
Yeah.
And whether it's physical or spiritual, it doesn't matter. But it's this idea that sometimes the Lord allows us to go through things because he knows that by letting us go through them, it actually makes us better people and more like him.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah. And so that's kind of why I call Job the most important book of the Bible, because it really kind of helped me make sense of suffering. And that's not just for people with mental health, right? That's for people, I lost my sister and my stepdad in the course of 3 years. And, it helps me make sense of that, right? It helps me rely on that there is something bigger at play.
I love that. That is so good. The 4 deaths. You just talked a little bit about it.
Yeah, and so that's that's why that chapter in that book, the book of Job, was so helpful. So in the course of 4 years, then I lost my grandparents, who I told you earlier on that my home upbringing, my life there was not the greatest. And so my grandparents, there were stretches I would go live with them for months.
They were your stability.
Exactly. And so
Grandpa the mechanic.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was really tough when I lost them. But then about a year after my grandpa died, my sister was killed in a car accident on the interstate. It wasn't her fault. She was just driving along. She was picking up a part for her car. Some guy crossed the center lane. And it was a collision at 75 miles an hour. There was nothing left of both cars.
Tragic.
And that was tough, right?
Tragic. How old was she?
She was 33.
So sad.
And so that was tough enough, right? But then in 2020, my stepdad, who was just, I talked about him kind of coming in and raising us. He came home from work one day early. He wasn't feeling well. He laid down and woke up and basically, started vomiting all over and rushed him to the ER. He loses consciousness on the way there, never wakes up. And dies within a couple days on Easter, actually. And it ended up being a massive stroke in his brainstem. This is the worst kind of stroke you can have. And so, I talk about how, and this is really kind of makes the point of if we're going to go through struggles, we have to have this proper perspective of, I have learned to define I've learned to define my circumstances by who I know God is, and not
Yes.
define God by my circumstances, right?
I love it. Can you just repeat that?
Yeah. So
That's so quotable.
right. And so I'll put it in this way. So what I've come to understand about that proper theology of suffering and what we go through is that I can't define God by my circumstances,
That's right.
but define my circumstances by who I know God is. And so
And we know God is good.
right. And we know he's working things.
We know he's working things for our good.
Right. And so, I wrote the book out like this with these chapters in mind and in this order because it was coming to that understanding of my own mental health. And like I said, the foundations and principles that I learned about accepting and understanding that God is working in my mental health are things that anyone can use for any tragedies
That's right.
that happen in their life.
That's right.
And so when the 4 deaths happen, it's been tough, but it's been easier, I know, than if those things would have happened before my mental health struggle.
Yes.
So I can even just see how the Lord has used my mental health struggle to even kind of prepare me
Yes.
and get me in a proper mindset for then when these tragedies happen.
Well, so you can handle anything that comes along. And I always repeat something that my grandmother says. You can't put a question mark where God puts a period. And I think that's what happens, especially with people who have high anxiety. OCD is they just put the question mark and they're just like, why?
We question everything.
Why?
Yeah.
Why? And we just can't. We cannot put a question mark where God puts a period. And when someone dies, it's a period. That is it. It is it. And it's final. And we just have to know that God is sovereign. And the memories are so precious. And I do pray that God will continue to sustain the beautiful memories that you have of everyone in your family, because love is eternal and those memories are eternal. And it is so special. But you are 100% right about suffering. And I know in my own life, I had sort of believed that lie too. Like if I make all the right choices, if I do all the right things, then everything's going to turn out just right. And when that wasn't the scenario, as if it was a recipe, that like if I follow in the instructions, I'll bake the cake and it'll turn out perfectly. That's just not the way life is. But we know that God is good all the time, no matter what. So we will continue to talk about finding rest in the world that we live in the life that we have, no matter what. We'll be right back after the break. Stay with us.
From Burleson to Venus and Grandview to Godley, this is the voice of Johnson County, Joco Community Radio.
Breaking news this hour from townhall.com. I'm John Scott. The president's selection of a Supreme Court nominee may imperil passage of his Build Back Better spending bill. Bob Agnew reports.
Analysts say dealing with a Supreme Court nomination is likely to delay other business, including the president's signature social spending bill. Jim Manley, a former aide to Senator Harry Reid, says, quote, at some point, that nomination process is going to consume all of the oxygen on Capitol Hill in the Senate. Even if Build Back Better is passed, it may be too late in the year for voters to see any tangible benefits before the election. As Manley puts it, quote, time is not the friend of Build Back Better. The longer this stretches out, the more difficult it's going to become. Bob Agnew reporting.
Also at townhall.com, the cold temperatures continue on the East Coast, but so does the cleanup from the nor'easter that dumped more than 2 feet of snow in some areas.
Glenn Phillip, who was out shoveling snow in Brooklyn, says this is his kind of weather.
It could be like this all the time. I'm good. Some people may not like it.
One of those people is Brooks, who was walking by.
On weather like this, I'll share with you my deepest thoughts. Being in Barbados right now.
But for now, he's here with the rest of us, trudging through the snow like Denia Petway.
Sometimes you could slip and stuff, but we still have to manage.
Forecasters say temperatures will start rising by midweek, coupled with the sun should help melt some of the leftover snow. Julie Walker, New York.
The former head of training for the Minneapolis Police Department is back on the witness stand in the trial of 3 former Minneapolis police officers charged with violating George Floyd's civil rights. Katie Blackwell testified last week the 3 officers did not follow department policy when Floyd was killed. Defense attorneys trying to make the case that the officers' training was inadequate in some areas. On Wall Street, stocks have been higher. The Dow has had 265 points, the NASDAQ up 377. More at townhall.com.
Your pets have
When you're hungry for tender brisket or some delicious homemade cobbler, then look no further than Leach Brothers Barbecue, located at 1106 East Henderson, Cleburne, Texas. Leach Brothers has been family-owned and operated since 1950. Take it from me, Taco Joe Orwinski. Todd and his family have been filling my belly breakfast, lunch, and dinner for a long time. Heck, I even have my own booth, open Monday through Saturday, 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. Come see them for dine-in, carry-out, and all your catering needs.
At Romika Designs, we're more than just a laser engraving and specialty design company. Much more. I'm Ron Phillips, co-owner of Romika Designs, and if you can dream it, we can probably make it. We can custom laser cut and engrave on nearly all material. Great for one-of-a-kind gifts, home decor, business and specialty items, or personalized and logoed designs created just for you or your company. Allow us to become your go-to gift and specialty project partner. Romika Designs can help make your ideas a reality. We're ready to help you design and create that special gift for any occasion or engrave your personal or business logo on just about any product. View our designs at romikadesigns.com or simply email us with your ideas. We specialize in custom design and would be honored to have the opportunity to discuss it with you. Call us at 817-400-4040, email info@romikadesigns.com, or visit us on the web at romikadesigns.com.
Hey, there's something you forgot to do. It sure is hot. Are you sweating like a dog? Wait, what? Dogs don't sweat. Oh no, you forgot to get your window tinted. Whether it's the kitchen window that sits in the sun for the hottest part of the day, or you just got new wheels, call Sharp Window Tinting in Burleson. 817-615-9379, or look them up on the web, sharpwindowtint.com.
You're listening to Joco Community Radio. Welcome back to The Her Show. That's Home Experience Radio with your host, Trina Titus Lozano, pastoral counselor and ordained Christian minister. She's here to give you advice and answer your questions about life, love, and other mysteries. Call our studio line now at 817-637-2585. Now, here's Trina.
Joco Community Radio is proud to be the voice of Johnson County, Texas, and is live 365 on the TuneIn Radio Network. So to listen, go to tuneinjoco.com and download the free app. All of our shows can also be found on any of your favorite podcast platforms, such as Spotify, iTunes, Amazon, and Spreaker. So check out our lineup and more on jococommunityradio.com. Thanks for tuning in. This episode and more brought to you by Next Level Claims, making your insurance work for you. Reach out to your Texas sales rep, Nona Reed, 844-TEX.HAIL, 844-839-4245. I love this community. I love this radio station. If you would like to join the conversation today with me and my host, John Seidl, just feel free to pick up the phone and give us a call. You can ask him a question, 817-637-2585, 817-637-2585, and you can talk to myself or John. And his book is called Finding Rest. You can get that on Amazon or Walmart or Target or anything like that. Finding Rest, a survivor's guide to navigating the valleys of anxiety, faith, and life. And you can also go to his website, johnseidl.com, JONSEIDL.com. This book is already a bestseller, just came out in September. And I mean, it has skyrocketed and just been such a blessing to everyone who's read it. I read it on audiobook, listened to it, and it really blessed me. It really was such a blessing to just hear his story. And John, that's what it's all about. It's all about telling stories. And you know the value of telling stories from working at I Am Second. And it's interesting how God just put on your heart to not keep this a secret.
Yeah, it's funny. I fought him a little bit on it. I was diagnosed in about 2014. And
this book just came out in 2021.
Yeah, exactly.
So you didn't tell your story right away, did you?
Right. Well, and so I first wrote about it in 2000, and it was the end of 16 or beginning of 17. And it was one of those things as I was working at I Am Second. And, if anyone's familiar with that organization, they really tell stories about, just some of life's worst things that have happened to people and just how they've overcome them, especially with God's help. And so I was creating written content for them. They do a lot of their stuff through films. And so I was in charge of all the written content, and I was kind of hiring all these freelancers and bloggers to kind of write about their own difficult experiences and what they've learned. And it was funny because I kind of had that tap on my shoulder that said, well, John, there's something that you could write about and talk about, And I think, I think we have come a long way in about 5 years, but back then it was, I think there was, I still think there's a stigma, especially in the Christian world. There was even more so back then.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be John, the anxiety guy. John, the OCD guy.
No,
right?
yeah.
And especially for me, I didn't want my current employer, I didn't want any future employers or anyone I worked with to be able to dismiss me and say, oh, maybe there's a point that John is really harping on. Maybe there's something that he is really passionate about.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's just the anxiety. That's just the OCD.
Yeah.
Give them an excuse to dismiss me because of that.
Yeah.
But I will be honest, I finally did write about it, and the reactions that I got really affirmed why it was the right decision.
Yeah.
So many people coming out and saying, yeah, that's my story. Right. And so I say in the introduction, I want to tell your story by telling my story.
Sure.
And so many people, especially in the Christian community, who said, yeah, my dad was a pastor, or my church told me I shouldn't take medication, and just seeing how many people have suffered in silence.
Oh, yeah.
On this topic.
It's embarrassing.
Yeah.
It's an embarrassing topic to say, okay, I have anxiety and OCD.
Yeah, because they're
well, they might even quote a scripture.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, I call that coffee cup Christianity. It's like
quoting the scriptures,
like just kind of throwing some don't be anxious about anything. It's like, yeah, that can fit on a coffee cup, but there's a lot more context. There's a lot more going on.
Yeah,
there's a lot more that you and I should talk about before you just kind of throw that at me.
That's right, and it's easier said than done.
Exactly.
For everybody. But that was so important. And so you began to tell. So you wrote your first story there with I Am Second.
Yes. So I wrote that. And once I wrote that and saw the reaction, I knew, okay, there's something more
It's not just me.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so it was still a little bit after that before I was contacted by a book publisher and said, hey, have you ever thought about putting this in a book? And I was like, yeah, I just don't really know where to start.
Yes. Well, but then look at the timing. I mean, as a society, what we have been through in 2020, 2021, and now just finishing the first month of 2022, and things are not getting any more
normal
or restful or normal. I mean, seriously, as far as things to worry about, there's more and more and more all the time.
It is funny. I signed the contract for my book in January of 2020.
Wow.
And not what 2 months later,
2 months,
entire country shuts down. And and I think now more than ever, people who haven't experienced anxiety are experiencing it.
Oh, for sure.
And people have asked me, like, why do you think that is? And I say, well, let me tell you a story. Is like, so a few years back, I was training for a motorcycle trip, because what I learned is when you go on a really long motorcycle trip, you got to get used to sitting your butt on a motorcycle for hours.
I've been there, done that. I'm good at it.
Right. And so
I bet it does. It literally goes numb.
Yeah,
it goes to sleep.
Exactly. So I would take these long weekend rides with my brother-in-law. Like, we live obviously in Texas, and it was the summer. And so we would have to get up, before the sun gets up on a Saturday morning, before, you just get baked out of your seat.
Yeah.
And we would just ride for as long as we could.
Yeah.
Just trying to get used to that feeling.
Sure.
Right. And so I went on a Saturday morning ride with my brother-in-law, and come back and I kind of take all my, protective gear off. I have this pain kind of on my back, and it's kind of like a rash. And so I told my wife, I was like, hey, can you look at that? Like, what does it look like? She goes, oh, it just kind of looks like a heat rash. And I'm like, okay, I guess, I have my jacket on and all that stuff. And so I just kind of go about my day, and it just gets worse and worse. And to the point where like I have to take my shirt off because I can't even stand
the touching
feeling.
the rubbing.
And this is a classic. My wife is more of the just suck it up type. So she kind of like jokingly kind of said, she's like, "I'll just suck it up." Is this a case of the man? Yeah, is this a case of the man cold here?
Right.
And so we go to volunteer at church. I think it was the next day, to help with repaint a school or something like that. And I walk in, and my buddy, he looks at me, and he goes, are you okay? You look like you're in a lot of pain. And I said, yeah, I'm got this rash. He goes, let me look at it. So I kind of lift up the back.
Was it shingles?
Lift up the back of my shirt, and he goes, brother, you got shingles. And I'm like, what?
I've had it.
And he goes, yeah, I've had it twice.
Mm-hmm.
Nice little band of blisters across my back. And he goes, you need to go in now and see if you can get an antiviral, at least get on some pain meds. It's really painful, isn't it? And I was like, yes, it's really painful. So why do I tell that story? Because when I went to the doctor, at the time I was in my late 20s, and I'm thinking, what, shingles is for, old people.
Old people.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And so
it's a chickenpox virus for listeners who don't know.
Exactly. So this is what I learned is the doctor said, well, John, it's the chickenpox virus that goes dormant in your body.
Yeah.
And when you're older, it tends to come out because your immune system is breaking down, or in times of great stress, or anxiety. And so I was going through kind of a tough time at work, and it broke through. Right. And that to me is the story of anxiety in the pandemic. Right.
Yes.
Everyone has anxiety because everyone has a fight or flight. Right.
Everyone.
But I think what happened is a lot of the kind of clinical anxiety that we talk about, and I want to get into, the question of, well, how do I know if I just have regular anxiety or something bigger? A lot of that was kind of suppressed and just kind of laid dormant. And then you have, a once in a lifetime or once in two lifetimes, experience that awakens this anxiety that people are like, where did this come from?
That's right.
Just like the chickenpox virus was dormant in my spine, and great stress and heat and all that kind of stuff gets the perfect
storm for shingles.
For shingles,
Yep.
And so that's what I think a lot of people have experienced. I think that's why it's popped up a lot during the pandemic, is like, yeah, when you put this perfect storm together, that anxiety that was just quote unquote normal.
That's right.
Before, it has now turned into a full-blown clinical issue. And so that kind of brings me to the point of I get asked a lot, well, John, how do I know if this is just like that normal anxiety you're talking about, or something that I need to go to a doctor,
clinical,
or a counselor, or whatnot. And so, and you can chime in on this part, but I tell people when it really starts affecting your day-to-day life, right?
and your relationships.
Yes.
Like you said, it created a serious marriage problem where your wife said, okay, enough is enough, because this is not okay. We've been fighting over all weekend over this sweet and low and the Splenda situation. And so this is affecting our relationship, and enough is enough. You need help.
Yeah.
And so when it begins affecting your relationships, that's when, at the very least, you've got to go get some help. And that's where it crosses the line. And I love the testimony though that you have, about that husband and wife that were going to be getting a divorce.
Yeah, that is one of my that one just almost brings me to tears every time.
Me too. And I love nothing more. I mean, I do mostly marriage counseling. I love nothing more than to watch a marriage that is just on the brink of divorce be salvaged and then restored to being something so beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that story is technically it was before the book came out. A gentleman reached out to me and said, hey, I've heard that you have this book coming out. He's like, is there any way that you would send me an early copy? He said, because I was just diagnosed with anxiety And it really is helping me make sense of who I've been, what I've been going through, and what I've been struggling with for as long as I can remember.
Yes.
I finally put a name to it, right? So
Yes.
call it by its name. And he said, he's like, I'll buy like 5 copies when it comes out. I was like, listen, yes, here's an early copy of the book. And the other thing he told me was his wife had just filed for divorce.
Right. He was desperate.
Because I think, like my wife, there's just a lot.
Enough is enough.
Yeah, I can't live. I can't, I don't know what's going to set you off. I don't know what's going to put you into one of those thought cycles. And so I let him read the book. And I think within a day or two, he came back and said, hey, do you mind if I let my wife read this? And I'm like, absolutely. That's why that chapter 9 is in there. And so then she reads it. And this is why, I said earlier that it's kind of become this unexpected, beautiful thing. This chapter 9 helped me understand.
Yeah.
Because she reads it. And so I even go through that chapter of like, let me just explain to you exactly what anxiety is. Like, as a loved one, you may not even fully realize what this is.
Yes.
So going to explaining what it is, what not to say, what to say.
Yeah.
And long story short, he said, he came back again. He said she read it, and it was like a light bulb for her. She didn't feel alone, in the sense that she's like, oh, your wife has kind of experienced that too.
That's right.
And I also know that this is a little bit more normal. Some of the issues we're having are a little bit normal when you have a partner with this. And so she basically withdrew the divorce papers. They moved back in together. And, it's not like, I want to get to this because you talked about Job's book ending. And what I talk about in the ending of my book is, I'm not going to pretend like they still don't have issues to work through and that it isn't 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But it has been, it's just a beautiful picture of what can happen when, you call it by its name, you name something,
and it's treated,
and you fight it, and you fight back.
That's right. And it's treatable. It is treatable.
It's not a death sentence.
It is not a death sentence. It's treatable. So talk about the ongoing battle.
Yeah. And so that's perfect. I'm glad you asked about that, because that's what I was talking about. The end of my book is, I think there are a lot of anxiety books, especially Christian ones out there that pretend like, well, if you just read my book and do, these 7 steps, everything is going to be great. And, I try to be realistic. And what I tell people is reading my book is not going to cure you. It's not going to heal you. It's not, none of that. Right. What it means is you're finally going to understand what's going on, and you're going to be given the tools to fight back.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because for me, it's an ongoing battle.
Listen,
as a person of faith, I pray every day that this is taken away from me. It hasn't. God is still allowing me to walk through this.
Yeah.
And so what that means is there are times where I can't get out of bed. Right.
Yeah,
There are times where the depression comes or the thought cycles come, and it is really hard.
Yeah.
But I'm a better person because of that. Right.
Sure.
And 2, God has given me tools to fight back that I talk about in the book. And so I never want to pretend that I'm quote unquote cured or whatever word you want to put in there. I'm, for anyone that's listening that is going through this, I'm just like you. Like, I in many ways, I am still walking through this battle.
Yeah.
And so then people ask, well, okay, if it's an ongoing battle, why do you call it finding rest? It's because for me, rest is not the ultimate destination, right? I mean, my ultimate destination is heaven, right?
Sure.
And so, it's, I don't pretend like you read this book and now you will find all the rest you ever need. For me, as a Christian, there's this thing called the armor of God, right?
Yeah.
And if God gives us armor, He's insinuating that we're going to be in battles.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
And so if we're going to continue to be in battles, the rest that I'm talking about in this book is the rest that comes when after you fight a battle, what do? You go back behind the lines and you recover, and you treat your wounds, and you get fed, and you get rest, and it's those moments of respite in between the individual battles.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
And so I'm fighting this ongoing battle, these ongoing battles,
Yeah.
And in between then, though, now I finally gotten to a place where I can find rest between those.
Yes.
Right. And that's the rest I'm talking about. That's the tools that I'm talking about to help people really kind of come to that understanding.
And the thing about it is, you never know when a battle's going to come
Mhm.
because they're spontaneous. And
Yes.
so triggers happen, a spontaneous, situation happens. You didn't expect it. But when you're rested, you can ride the waves. You can say, "Oh, whoa, it's happening right now." I'm in the battle now, and to just buckle up but if you're rested, you've got the energy to do that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because I think that actually that idea applies a lot to medication. I talk to a lot of people who it seems like their only goal in life is to get off their medication. And like, listen, if you in course with your doctor and your counselor and or whoever you're seeing and talking with, like, if you want to try to get off your meds, that's fine. But I think sometimes we make it like this idol. Like, if I can only get off my meds, then everything is fine. And so what I tell people is, you talked about the car accident. So in November, I was looking to trade in my truck. I was telling you about how I had this truck and I had it since like 2012, and I was just, my grandpa's a mechanic, and so I just loved like working on it and fixing it. And then it just got to a point where like so much stuff was breaking that my wife's like, "Can you just trade that thing in?
Get a new truck already." Yeah.
And so the day I go to trade it in, we go to the first dealership. Didn't really like the deal, so I drive home. I'm picking us up something to eat, and I've almost completely backed out of my parking spot, and this woman comes and hits me.
Oh my gosh.
And puts just a big dent in the back right side of my truck, and I'm just like, "Are you kidding me?" And again, remember, car issues are a trigger for me.
Yes.
Well, I get out, I assess the situation. I can sense myself starting to get really worked up.
Of course.
And
yeah.
kind of the beginnings of a panic attack.
Sure.
I call my wife. I say, "Hey, can you come?" Everything's taken care of, but I just kind of feel myself starting to
unravel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so she comes, she helps me calm down. We get it taken care of. Everything's fine. Right. Well, I think a lot of times when people make such an idol out of getting out of their medication is, listen, I didn't know that I was going to get in that car accident.
No.
Right. I wasn't planning on getting,
Never.
I wasn't planning on getting
Never.
hit. Right.
Right.
So one of the reasons I continue to take my medication when I'm quote unquote feeling good,
yes,
when I'm in a good time, is because I don't know when the bad times are going to come.
That's right. And they could come at any time, at any moment.
Right. I could be backing out of, I think it was a Subway shop and someone hits me. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I was preparing our Easter service at our church, 2 years ago, and I got the call that my stepdad was in the ER.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know when those bad times are going to come.
We never know.
The medication isn't just to keep me steady in the good times. It's so that when those peaks come during the bad times, those peaks aren't as big.
That's right. That's right. And it makes a really big difference.
Exactly.
Like we said, not only in your health, but in your relationships and in your ability to handle whatever the curveballs, in life. You can handle the curveball.
Exactly.
And it won't hit you. I like something that I heard you mention on a podcast, actually. You were talking about your sister's addiction and how, and I do want to address that because I think that you made such a good point that if people just say, okay, the answer to the crack addiction is just to get clean and sober and to not do the drugs. So my answer is go to rehab and get out and don't do drugs. And I love how you just have a beautiful revelation of no, that's not the answer. The answer isn't what not to do; it's what to do.
Yeah.
And I love that. Would you tell us about that?
Yeah. So my sister, I said, at a very young age, started experimenting, excuse me, with drugs, and that became a full-on crack addiction that she tried to go to rehab for. She went to prison for. And there was something that I would always say to her, and I would say, Jenny, it's not just being clean. It's not just running away from crack. It's what are you running to?
Yes.
What
I
are you
love that.
what are you going towards, not just away from? Because listen,
Yes.
in the there's a zombie apocalypse, right? You can run away from zombies all day long and you're just going to be tired.
You're just running.
Right.
Yeah.
But until you find a safe house
Yeah.
where you can rest, where you can
Yes.
actually recover.
A place to run to.
Exactly. You have to have something to run to, or you're always just running.
Just running.
And so, that was kind of a revelation for me just on the addiction level, but I think it's also good for us to remember here is like, it's not just the absence of anxiety. It's not just the absence of, or things are just going really good now. It's like, what are you running to? What are you running towards?
That's right. I think that is so important because anybody that is relatable to everybody.
Mhm.
We all need to be running to something. We all need to be we need to know where am I going and how am I going to get there? Because if we just focus on where we're running from, what we're running from, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And you're like you say, it's like you're going in circles.
You need a goal, right?
That's
you
right.
need some.
You need a destination.
Yeah.
And you have to understand, and this is where I think faith is such a beautiful thing. And you talk a lot about faith in your book. That's part of it. But God has a plan, and it's not his plan for you to just run.
Mm-hmm.
His plan isn't for you to just survive. It's to thrive. It's to be the best version of yourself. And so this is where we have to know that we know God is good and he has a plan for my life. And he wants me to go toward the goal of being the best version of myself, but being set free, from this and being all that he's called me to be. It's such a neat concept.
Yeah.
What to do. And I always tell people when I'm giving parenting advice, parents also, I think, get too focused on telling their kids what not to do.
I'm guilty of that for sure.
Don't run, don't scream, don't run, don't hit. And it's so much better to just say, stop, hold my hand.
Yeah.
Close your mouth.
Instead of
put your hands in your pockets.
Stop jumping on the couch. It's like, hey, could you get down and
sit?
And yeah, exactly.
Sit. Because it's almost like they have to double process. If you're saying, okay, don't jump on the couch, okay, but what do they do? But it's like they have to figure out, okay, if I don't do this, what I do,
I got all this energy.
Yeah. Which you could say, okay, you know what? Run outside now. Get off the couch and run outside now. Like you're giving them clear instruction of what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this book really can help people navigate that and really to give them clear instruction of what to do.
Yes.
What to do so that they don't continue to cycle and cycle and cycle. So this is not the end of the story. And this is not the end of your story. You're continually writing a story and writing a new story.
Yeah.
And before we end this break, tell us just for some fun facts about your family life and your marriage now and your wife and your children.
Yeah. So my wife and I met in college in New York City, and
yay! What school?
The King's College in New York
wow.
City. So at the time, I went to school in the Empire State Building, which was just fascinating.
So beautiful.
The school has now since moved down to Wall Street. Still is equally exciting. Well, maybe not as equally exciting. I like the Empire State Building. That was pretty cool.
Oh, it was just awesome. Nothing like it.
Yeah. So we met there and got married after I graduated school. She was a year younger, so that's why we moved out to Denver, and she finished up at a school out there. And so we have two kids. Who are 6 and 3, Annie and Jack. And we are coming up on our 13th wedding anniversary.
Yay. Congratulations. And I think the best part about that is that you have a story of, even though it wasn't easy, you know what? We didn't quit. We didn't quit. We're still here. And what a blessing for your children to have a mom and dad that love each other and that understand each other.
Yeah.
That's so awesome. Okay, we'll be right back after the break talking about anxiety and finding rest with author Jonathon Seidl. Be right back.
I would like to personally invite you out to the Blue Family Fund Casino Night. An evening of all your favorite casino games, next level auction items, great music, and an open bar. February 26th, 7 p.m. at the beautiful TX Whiskey Ranch in Fort Worth, Texas. All proceeds from the evening will benefit families of first responders. You need to get your tickets today at bluefamilyfund.org.
Abnormal realities.
I love my mom.
Yep. She sent me a message.
My mom did?
Yeah, Wednesday night. And she invited me over tomorrow night to watch Titanic and share a bowl of popcorn. And I accepted.
You did?
Yep.
That'd be fun.
And she calls it Chaps Only Night. Every Saturday night.
Look.
Miss Dixie,
Look,
how you doing? He said, it's my mom, bro. All right, it's my mom.
I want to hear the answer to the Titanic and popcorn. Go ahead, Mom. What's up?
Oh!
Hi, boys. I just
Mom.
wanted to ask Rocky if he wanted butter on that popcorn or not.
I would rather have the butter somewhere else, but if popcorn's the only place I can have it, I'll take it.
Jeez,
hey,
dude.
nobody says I can't roll around in it for a little bit.
All right, Mom.
That is
love
my
you.
girl. I love you,
Mom.
Dixie.
Abnormal realities.
My mom, love you.
Dixie.
Bye, I love you too.
With Ron and Rocky. Weekdays, 4 p.m. and 10 p.m. on JoCo Community Radio.
Holy crap.
Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395, 800-709-4395, 800-709-4395, 800-709-4395.
You're listening to JoCo Community Radio.
Welcome back to the Her Show. I'm Trina Titus Lozano, and I'm here today with John Seidl, author. Please get his book. You need it. You need it. It needs to be just a part of your library, because you might not think that you would ever deal with anxiety, but somebody in your family will at some point. You need this in your back pocket. You need this in your library. And it's also an audiobook. It's a fantastic audiobook. He's reading it. So you can get on Amazon or Walmart or Target or anything like that, wherever you like to buy books. But johnseidl.com, JONSEIDL.com.
And you know what? I just butt in here and say they can also go to Find Rest Now.
Okay.
If my last name is too hard to spell, although I did buy all the misspellings of it.
Did you? Oh, that's hilarious.
Just in case.
Because you're a marketing genius. Yes, you are.
But if you go to findrestnow.com, that also brings you to
findrestnow.com. You know, my show is about love and peace and making your home a place of love and peace. Well, there's nothing that steals love and peace than anxiety. That's exactly what it does. And, you know, without peace, love isn't believed. So you can tell your wife that you love her, and you were, but when there's no peace, when you're obsessing about something, she doesn't feel loved, you know, because there's no peace. And so there's finding rest and having the peace is so important for love to be believed.
Yeah.
And then when one person loses their peace, it is this chain reaction, and then everybody loses their peace in the home. And so it's so important to be able to find rest and find peace, no matter what we're dealing with, because life has constant struggles always. And so this is just a fantastic book. So talk to us about the physical battle, the spiritual battle, and the difference.
Yeah. And actually, right before you said something there that triggered something that I want to just say real quick before I get into that, which is, you know, there was a time, an early manuscript of the book that my wife read, and this was kind of during the middle of COVID, right? And I tell people, you know, I think we were walking around the block for the 75th time in a row,
right? Because what else do you do?
Yeah, because that's all you
get
could
out
do.
of the house
Exactly.
Walk around the block.
And so she had read an earlier, the earliest manuscript of the book, and I said, you know, babe, like, is there anything that I'm missing? Anything that should go in there? And she said, tell them to get counseling. And I said, well, I advocate for counseling in my book. Yeah, that's in there. She goes, no. Not the person who's struggling, the person who loves the person that's struggling.
Yeah.
And what kind of came out of that conversation was this really important conversation in the life of our marriage and relationship, which is, you know, my wife was obviously elated once I got help and was diagnosed and was treating it. But there was a lot of what she realized is there was a lot of hurt some resentment even from when we were in the thick of it when I was undiagnosed, right? And so what her message to those loved ones is, just because I've gotten counseling, just because I've gotten help, you as a caregiver, maybe as a loved one, you have gone through a lot of things too. And so what I realized is, she was more of a rock in our relationship than I even realized at the time, because I was so volatile in the sense of, what's going to throw me into one of these thought cycles. And so she had to bear a lot of burdens that I didn't realize. And so one of the things that I want to make sure that people hear is, if you are a loved one of someone who's going through a mental health issue, make sure that you get help as well.
Take care of your mental health.
Yeah,
that's right.
Exactly.
It's the whole airplane principle.
Yeah,
give
right?
oxygen to yourself first.
Yeah,
that's right.
Exactly.
Because it's exhausting. It's exhausting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think, a lot of times, us as the sufferer want to be heard. We want to be understood, and that's great. But you remember, it was a conversation with my wife that finally made me realize, okay, I need to get help. When I really heard her and understood her.
Yeah.
Right. And so you as the loved one deserve to be heard and understood as well.
Absolutely.
So
such a great point. I'm so glad that you listened to your wife.
Yeah, right.
And so the rest of us can just benefit from that. That's so true.
Yeah. So you had said something in there that really kind of reminded me of that. So the physical battle and the spiritual battle, these are chapters that are back to back in the book, chapter 5 and chapter 6. And so I think, in a lot of things in society today, we try to make it all one thing or all another thing, right?
Right.
We don't really like gray areas, right?
I know, yeah.
You're either all good or you're all bad, or all the things. And so I think the mistake that is made a lot in mental health is, and especially when it comes to anxiety and OCD, is to say it's either, if you're in the secular world, it's all a physical battle. And then if you're in the spiritual world, it's all a spiritual battle, right?
Right.
And neither of those things are true.
No.
It's a both and. It's not
That's
an
right.
either or.
Yes.
And so what I have come to understand, and this kind of goes back to that glasses principle earlier, is that my anxiety and OCD are both a physical issue and a spiritual issue.
Yes.
And
yes.
I have to address all of it in order to find those moments of rest.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. And so for me, there are, synapses that misfire.
That's right.
Chemicals that are off balance in my
right.
brain. You can't deny that. That's a physical thing, right?
That's right.
But I also know that as a person of faith, there are also, there's also a pride issue that says, I can figure everything out. I can be the one that controls everything, right? There's a desire to be God, right? I want to control everything. Something happens that I can't control, and I want to control it, right?
Right.
A lack of trust, right? There's a pride issue. Like I said, that just says that I can do all that stuff. I am the great, the great and powerful Oz, right? And so I think what I have found is, though, I can't treat the spiritual until I treat the physical first.
Yeah.
Right. And so this kind of goes to that point where I said, listen, if I'm at an 8 in anxiety, my medication brings that down to a 4. So now not only in a 4, I'm able to take on that external stimuli,
right,
make sense of it more, or approach it in a logical way. But that also means that I'm able to open my Bible. That also means I'm able to do studies. I'm able to read devotionals that really feed my spirit and help me be at peace with things that come along. So this idea of it being both a physical and spiritual battle is really, really important and key.
Yes, it is.
Because I think, in my upbringing, it was just a spiritual battle. Right.
Yes.
And I had a stepdad who, at times, very early on, he had since changed his perspective on this, but would say, he'd come down the steps, he looked like death and be coughing and sneezing and, hacking up a lung. And you'd be like, Mike, are you sick? No, I'm not sick. I'm not confessing that over myself. And it's like, well, you're sick. You're sick. Like, just take some medicine and you will feel better. No, I'm not going to do that. It's like, Well, no, that's not smart either, right?
Right. Exactly.
Because going back to calling it by its name, and we can revisit that too, is the idea of naming something and then being able to treat it. It's actually biblical, right?
That's right.
If you look in the Bible, the first job we were given was to name the animals.
Yes, that's
and
right.
and man names the animals, and inherently then it shows that the hierarchy, the dominion that he has.
Yes.
Right. So by naming something, you are claiming a position of power over it.
Authority. That's right.
So where some people might walk around and say, well, no, you don't have anxiety, it's all just a spiritual thing. It's like, no, I actually gain power over it by naming it.
That's right.
And saying that I have it.
That's right. That's right. And I can do something about it.
Exactly. And then I get to the positions. One of my favorite lines is I get to the point where I have anxiety and OCD and it doesn't have me.
I love that. And it's true. It has no power over you.
Yeah.
And before it used to, but now it doesn't.
Right. And what I say that is also a difference between the ongoing battle and it having power over me.
Yeah.
Right. So before, it would ruin my weekends.
Right.
Right. It would put me in bed for days.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not saying I still don't have some of those moments.
Yeah.
But I've gotten to a place where that is not my constant. Right. That is not my life. Right. Those become now the exception and not the rule. Whereas before they were the rule.
It was
and not the
right.
exception.
It was common. And
Yes.
now it's
Exactly.
uncommon.
Exactly.
That's so important. And I do think that there is a lot of misconception there. And it's always, we are a 3-part, we are body, soul, and spirit.
Yeah.
It's not, we cannot separate. This is all of who we are. I love the description that you were talking about of the Bible being like a tome or a tome, however you pronounce it.
Yeah.
And just talk about that. And then I love just kind of the, I don't know, the word picture that you said, really, the Bible's written to me.
Yeah, exactly. So that there was, it kind of comes from some of the work I've done with my company, in working with some just great and cool organizations. And so, the Bible, there's a tome or a tome. I actually like the tome word, right? It's
I
kind
know
of French,
it sounds
right?
nice. Sounds classy.
Right. And so the idea is it's kind of this really big scholarly book
That's right.
that's been written. And so what is interesting though, so tomes are generally like they're really kind of standoffish, right?
That's
They're
right.
really big, and you're like, oh,
Uh,
read the Brothers Karamazov, like I'm just gonna sit down and read that real quick, you know?
Yeah.
And so, but when you look at the Bible, and I was actually talking to someone about this morning, about how we even talk about scripture in the Bible, is when we talk about it in active voice, how much more of a reality it makes it that the Bible is for us today, not just for the people who it was
Right.
quote unquote written to, 2,000 years ago. And so when you realize that the Bible is kind of this love letter to you, and has the guidance for a lot of the things you're dealing with, it just becomes it becomes more concrete, right? It
Yes.
becomes more accessible.
That's right.
And so I did some work with an app and a group about sharing my story
Mhm.
in video form, in devotion form, to kind of help people understand, like, the scriptures that have helped me are alive and active, right? And they are currently and consistently helping me. Now, that's not to say, right, you had mentioned this earlier, and I think it's so good, is that I think sometimes scripture can be wielded as a weapon to people who are struggling, by people who really don't want to get into the nitty-gritty with you, right?
That's right.
And so I think there are sometimes, you had asked me earlier, like, what should people do? And I would say one of the things that they really need to do is be willing to not have the answers, right?
Oh, that's good.
Because I think sometimes we hear of someone struggling with something, and we feel like we have to give them an answer. So I think a lot of times that comes or that leads to that type of coffee cup Christianity that I talked about. You know, you come to me,
let go and let God.
Yeah, exactly. You know, you come to me and you're like, I'll be honest, I'm really struggling with anxiety.
Oh, be
Trina,
anxious for nothing.
Yeah, you know, well, as you know, Jesus said, don't be anxious. Yeah, let go and let God. And you're like, but really, that's me saying to you, I'm not willing to really enter into this with you.
Right.
I'm just going to give you kind of something that makes me feel like I've given you an answer.
Yes, right.
And so instead, I have to be comfortable with saying, you know, Trina, like, thank you for telling me that. I'm not sure I have the perfect thing to say right now, but I just want to let you know, like, let's continue to go out for coffee. Let's continue to talk through this. And, and I want to ask you some more questions as we go along. That's so much better.
Yes.
And it means that you, as the person who is trying to help, have to be vulnerable too.
That's right. That vulnerability, as we've learned, is the key to connection. And
Right.
that's why I love this story. But even searching the Word of God together. So as you search the Word more, and this scripture, Matthew 11:28 through 30, come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. When that's not just a quick fix, but you really were able to consume and absorb that had to be life-changing.
It was. And what is really interesting about this verse, and this is one of the reasons I put it in the front of the book, is if you notice there, Jesus doesn't say, you know, come to me, all who are laboring here, and I will give you rest. You will never have any difficulty or trouble, or, you know, but what he
no
actually,
disappointments.
Yeah, but what he talks about is, take my yoke upon you, for my yoke is easy, my burden is light. That means there is still
There is going to be a burden.
There still is a burden.
That's right.
But it's easier.
That's right.
When you have faith, and when you learn, like we talked about earlier, that the reason for those struggles is not in vain.
That's right.
Right. So there is still a yoke. There is still a burden.
That's right.
But now it becomes palatable. Now it becomes something that you're like, oh, it's not as tough.
That's right.
Listen, it was still tough when my sister and dad died. Right.
Oh.
But it wasn't as tough.
You know
Right?
what? The scripture Paul writes, and I forget exactly the reference, but he talks about each of us bearing one another's burdens, but each bearing our own. And in a way, that seems like a contradiction. It's like, okay, am I supposed to bear one another's burdens or bear my own? And it's a yes in both. You know, you have the burden to bear of anxiety and OCD. Like, you have that burden to bear. But your wife or a friend or a loved one, now me, I can join your circle of supporters. I can reach, like, as if you're holding a backpack of your burdens of this disease and anything else of life, your life's burdens or responsibilities. And then I can just lean over and, like, put my hand under your backpack and lift it up a little bit, so that burden's not quite so heavy. And I think that that's what Jesus does as well. He says that he is actually sitting at the right hand of the Father, interceding on your behalf. He's lifting the burden. And so we're to lift one another's burdens and know that Jesus also wants to lift the burden. We still have it, but he wants to lift that, and we're supposed to lift that, you know, for each other as well.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of my days playing high school football.
Yeah.
Right. So I would get in the weight room, and as I'm bench pressing, you have a spotter, right?
That's right.
And so that spotter, when I'm really shaking, I can barely get it up. Okay, he gives me a little help,
just a little,
right? But if he's the one that's doing it, well, I'm not getting stronger.
No,
right?
No.
So the purpose of him helping bear my burden is not for him to do it for me.
No,
because then there's no benefit. I'm not getting stronger, right? I'm not learning. I'm not growing.
That's right.
But if he can come in and help, either push me and encourage me, hey, you got this. Come on.
One more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then when I'm shaking, kind of give me that extra lift. Great. But I'm still getting stronger.
That's right. That's such a great analogy. Okay, so tell us about the 14 truths.
Yeah. So, I spent years in the news business. I left because I got burned out, right? And so, but in the
I
news,
can't imagine you getting burned out.
Yeah,
You getting
yeah,
burned out?
right.
Really? Okay.
Right. And so I think what I learned in my time in the news business is that if you really want to get something across, you got to put together a good list. And so I put together basically a list at
The value of a good list.
yeah.
Okay.
As the last chapter in the book to say, hey, these are the 14 truths that I've really kind of come to understand. And so I want to read all of them here real quick.
Go for it.
And then I'll kind of hone in on a couple. So one, for your good and God's glory, right? So we kind of talked about that in the proper
Yes.
theology of suffering, that this is not in vain. The second thing is you have a pride issue. We talked about that, right? That my anxiety and OCD tell me that I can and need to and must control everything. Well, that's pride. That's saying that I can be the final word on everything.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. 3 is that God's not punishing me, right? This
Okay.
isn't, I haven't, it's not like
He's not mad at you.
yeah, I haven't, oh my gosh, I said a bad word this weekend. So now here's a little anxiety for you. No. God is not a vending machine.
That's
that
right.
You either put this in and you get this out, or you don't put this in and you don't get that out. So that's important. I like to tell people you are broken. Right?
So what?
Yeah, exactly. We're all broken. I
That's
think
right.
what we don't realize is that everyone is broken.
Absolutely.
And so you're not irredeemable. You're not too far gone.
That's right.
Everyone is broken. And so we're all dealing with our
That's
issues.
right.
And that kind of leads into the 5th one, which is there is hope. Right?
That's right.
Is it's never too late.
And that's what I always tell people to use the acronym have only positive expectancies, not expectations, because that gets into a control thing, but expectancies. Have only positive expectancies. HOPE. Hold on to hope always. Never lose hope.
Yeah. Right.
Yes.
And if you're a Packers fan like me, you always hope for next year, and I think Dallas Cowboys fans as well.
Exactly. There's always hope.
Embrace tiny victories.
We're having to deal with life's disappointments right now.
Exactly.
But that's okay.
Exactly.
So what? It's okay.
Oh goodness. Number 6, embrace tiny victories. I think
yes.
I'm rewatching this documentary on the making of Frozen 2, and it's actually one of the most fascinating documentaries I've ever
put that
watched.
on my list.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I'm watching this second time because it's just so good. And Kristen Bell, the voice of Anna in the film, talks about how in Frozen 2 there's this song called "Do the Next Right Thing," and it was really born out of her own struggle with anxiety and OCD.
Yes.
And I think sometimes when we struggle, I tell people you're focusing too much on the big picture. A lot of times like, well, focus on the big picture. I say, no, focus on the small picture.
Break it down to the next step.
Exactly.
Next step.
Just get out of bed and go to the bathroom.
Baby
right?
steps. Just keep walking.
Brush your teeth.
That's right.
Wake the kids up. Just do the next right thing.
That's right.
And
That's
so
right.
so embrace those tiny victories.
That's
When
right.
I ever finding myself having a really hard day, I break it into as micro steps
That's
as I
right.
need to.
One step at a time.
I'm going to
That's
go
right.
downstairs and get a drink of water.
Well, how do you eat an elephant?
Exactly.
A bite at a time.
One bite at a time.
That's right.
And
celebrate it.
Exactly.
That's right. You did it.
Celebrate those tiny victories.
That's
Absolutely. Number 7, medication is okay. And we've talked about that.
That's right.
The chapter in the book is called The Little White Pill. And so I take a little white pill called fluoxetine, which is the generic version of Prozac. And it's been great for me. Right. Again,
Yep.
it's not a magic pill.
Well, and for different people, a different medication will be
Absolutely.
important. But you know what? You try it and see how it works.
Exactly. So that's
and it's okay.
It is okay.
Absolutely. It could be a big blessing in your life.
Exactly.
Yes.
Number 8, it's an ongoing battle.
That's right.
And so we talked about that a little bit, but I
because you're still alive.
Yeah, exactly.
As long as you're living, there's going to be an ongoing battle. That's right.
Exactly. And listen, there are times, when I find the most rest is when I'm kind of treating it, brain, body, and spirit.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean there's not things that just pop up.
That's
right. Even when you're doing everything right. I like to tell people,
right.
even when you're doing quote unquote everything right,
That's right.
there's still going to be times.
That's right.
And that doesn't mean you're failing or that you haven't done good. It's just going to happen.
It means you're
right?
still alive.
Exactly. Exactly. Number 9, it's never too late. I think that I was able to catch it younger, right?
Yes.
But I always wish I would have caught it even sooner, right?
Yes.
But I think there could be people listening out here, who are in the sunset of their life, right? That doesn't mean you enjoy the however many years you have left
That's
fighting
right.
back.
Get help
Yeah,
now.
exactly.
That's right.
Number 10 is you need to have community. I've really
Absolutely.
found the power of community. I told you my depression story earlier, where it was sending out that text and getting that phone call immediately from a member of an old community, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that guy was living in Tennessee at the time. And so what I like to tell people is you were not made to be alone.
No.
And I think especially for anyone who's a Christian is that if you look at the idea of the Trinity, God himself lives in community.
That's right.
Right.
That's
and so by being in community, we
That's
reflect who God is.
It is so important. That might be one of the most important ones.
Yeah.
Really. Well, they're all super important.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't pick one. They're all great.
I'll breeze through these last ones, but your struggle doesn't affect just you, right? I think sometimes because we get so self-focused, your spouse or your partner or whoever is helping you, it affects them. Number 12 is help others. Right.
Yes.
We talked about the power of serving
Yes,
and service and how that really gets it off of yourself. 3, God can handle your anger. Right. Or 13,
That's
I mean, God can handle your anger.
He already knows it's in there.
Right.
He already knows it. He might as well admit it.
Right. And
I
so
know.
in the book, I talk about the power of lamenting. There's a difference between questioning God and asking God questions.
Oh, it's so important.
Yeah. And
he already knows what you're thinking and feeling. You might as well be honest.
Right.
Yeah, just say it.
And you can say, this sucks.
Yes.
I'm not okay with this.
No.
And a lot of people in the Bible did the same thing.
That's right. They sure did. They sure did.
And then the final one is take care of yourself. And so, I think it becomes even just certain terms have started to pop up, self-care and, mental health days. And I think those things are great. And we should do those.
My grandma, she always has so many cute little things. So I quote her every show. Hi, Grandma. I know she's listening. But she's a faithful listener. No matter what I'm doing, she's supportive. But she says that joy is Jesus, others, and you. And I just love that because it really is. It is to have joy and to have peace as a regular part of our life. It's not about the circumstances. It really is having a connection with Jesus and with others, but we have to have peace in our own heart and an ability to know that as we're connecting with God through prayer, through meditation, just through knowing that He is real, that God is real. I am so blessed because I grew up in a home knowing that God is real. And I guess you did too. And so since I grew up knowing that God is real, when times in my life happen that bring me tremendous suffering, tremendous disappointment, I can always come back and go, you know what? God is real and He can do what He says He can do. And I am who He says I am, and I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. Another favorite scripture, God's word is alive and active in me, and I'm just going to keep believing God. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to have hope and believe God. This isn't the end of the story. And so no matter what the struggle is, it's not the end of the story.
There's a great theologian named Garth Brooks.
I love him.
Who once said some of God's greatest gifts are unanswered prayers. And it really is true, right?
Oh.
If I got everything I wanted and prayed for, my life would be miserable. Right. I wouldn't have my wife right now. Right. I probably would have married some other woman, my high school crush or something. Right.
Yeah.
But I have to rest in the fact that God has it under control and figured out.
Yeah.
And I don't. So
God is God and I am not. That's right.
I make an awful God.
And you just finished the book by saying, if you embrace one truth, let it be this, that those pains are for your ultimate good and God's ultimate glory. And then the end, here's to your ugly, messy, and beautiful journey. So thanks for being with us today, John. And to everyone who's on a journey and it includes anxiety, you know what? Get the book, Finding Rest by John Seidl. Thank you for joining me on The Her Show today. I'm Trina. Hugs and high fives.
From Burleson to Venus and Grandview to Godley, this is the voice of Johnson County, Joco Community Radio.
Breaking news this hour from townhall.com. I'm John Scott. More than 3/4 of